Hello and glad you can join us. Here's what's happening. The tragic toll as an Air India jet crashes moments after takeoff.
We have lost a lot of people.
The Canadian among the victims and a lone passenger's miracle survival.
It does raise concern.
How the crash is bringing fresh scrutiny to aircraft manufacturer Boeing.
What they're doing is unbelievably illegal.
Plus, the legal battle as anti-crackdown protests spread to more American cities.
CTV National News with Sandy Ronaldo.
A Toronto dentist was on the London-bound Air India jet that crashed minutes after takeoff from Ahmedabad. The Boeing Dreamliner slammed into a medical dormitory and exploded, also leaving dozens of casualties on the ground. There were 242 people on board the aircraft. Images are circulating of a sole survivor who walked away. CTV's John Venevali-Rao now on the crash, the victims, and what may have happened. John?
Sandy, the Canadian on board was a young mom. A crash the Indian Prime Minister has called heartbreaking beyond words. Video shows the plane eerily descending just seconds after takeoff, dropping into a residential area, and then a moment of pure horror. A huge fireball sending black smoke billowing into the sky. Rescuers rushing to the site where the Air India jet slammed into a building, used as a hostel for doctors and medical students. So far, officials recovering the remains of more than 200 people, with it still unclear how many on the ground were killed.
Very tragic and very, very horrific. And even till now, I have to say I'm in a state of shock.
The jet was an 11-year-old Boeing 787 Dreamliner, seen here as it raced down the runway, headed on a flight from Ahmedabad, India, to London, England. Moments after being airborne, this aviation official says the pilots issued an emergency call.
Would appear in the video, from my perspective anyway, that neither engine was developing power. So the aircraft was kind of gliding.
Loaded with fuel ahead of a long flight, the plane exploded on impact. On board 242 passengers and crew, including Indian, British, and Portuguese citizens, and Nirali Patel, a Canadian mother from Toronto who worked as a dentist. Her husband and other family members now headed for India. Incredibly, a single passenger managed to survive. Reportedly, this man, a British national who told a news outlet he heard a loud noise before the crash. Investigators will now want to retrieve the so-called black boxes, usually kept in the tail and seen still intact. Prime Minister Carney says Canadian transport officials have been in touch with their counterparts as British and American investigators head to India to help determine the cause of the crash.
Right.
Sandy.
CTV's John Venevali-Rao. Now, among those also heading to India, a team from Boeing. The incident brings attention back to the 787 Dreamliner, a flagship brand for the aircraft manufacturer. It has a history, but until today, it had one of the cleanest safety records in commercial aviation. CTV's Adrian Gobriel now on the plane and the company at another critical juncture. Adrian.
Sandy, it was just yesterday that President Donald Trump's nominee for the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration vowed to hold Boeing accountable following a series of previous safety issues. Less than 24 hours later, and the American company's troubling track record is back in the spotlight.
Boeing claims its 787-8 Dreamliner is the aviation industry's best-selling wide-body passenger plane of all time, carrying more than 1 billion people since it was first delivered to airlines in 2011.
It's a modern-day aircraft, it's very high-tech, and it's the leading edge of technology.
Air Canada has a total of 40 Boeing 787s. WestJet has 7 in their fleet.
Effectively, they are putting out defective airplanes.
Last year, Boeing engineer Sam Salapour testified before U.S. Congress, where he called for all 787 Dreamliner jets to be grounded immediately, amid claims that there are tiny gaps in the fuselage that could slowly come apart at 35,000 feet.
The company is taking manufacturing shortcuts on the 787 program that may significantly reduce the airplane safety.
Boeing has called the claims surrounding the structural integrity of the 787 inaccurate. Though some Boeing safety issues with its 737 MAX 9 model have been impossible for the company to deny. January 5th, 2014, the door panel of an Alaska Airlines plane falls off mid-flight. An investigation reveals the bolts weren't installed. 2 consecutive MAX airline crashes in 2018 and 2019 killed nearly 350 people in total. The problem stemming from a faulty sensor that pushed the aircraft's nose down, with pilots unable to regain control, leading to all MAX jets worldwide being grounded until recently.
It does raise concerns when an incident like that happens, that how can the quality process break down to that extent?
Just last month, the U.S. Justice Department reached a deal to allow Boeing to avoid criminal prosecution for allegedly misleading American regulators about the MAX airliner before those 2 deadly crashes.
Here at home, Air Canada has an order on the books for 18 new Boeing 787-10s expected to be delivered in 2026. Our questions to Boeing today about the current safety of the Dreamliner went unanswered. Sandy.
All right, CTV's Adrian Gabriel. Well, the situation is calmer in Los Angeles after another night of unrest. The riots are now in their 7th day, having spread to more American cities. And today, a legal hearing that challenges the U.S. president's decision to deploy the National Guard and the Marines. Let's bring in CTV's Washington Bureau Chief, Joy Malman. Okay, Joy, so where do things stand?
Sandy, the president and California's governor go head-to-head in court. Gavin Newsom wants to block the use of the military in L.A. Armed Marines are expected to be deployed as early as tomorrow. And the Texas governor, he just ordered another 5,000 National Guard. But these anti-immigration protests show no signs of slowing. There have been some clashes in New York and Seattle, but in L.A., the curfew, it seems to be working. Even the president seemed to undercut his own argument for soldiers on the street. Have a listen.
And last night was very good. Nobody showed up. You know why they didn't show up? Because we were there. If we didn't go, Los Angeles right now would be on fire. It would be a disaster. And we stopped it.
Okay, so Joy, California, one thing, but there's also more unrest expected this weekend that has nothing to do with the situation in California. So tell us about that.
Absolutely, Sandy. Road closures begin for Donald Trump's big military parade Saturday, which also happens to be his 79th birthday. Now, the president has always wanted a big parade, just like France and Russia, to show off U.S. military might. Tanks and armored vehicles will rumble down the streets of D.C. It's a pretty pricey pageant, costing about $40 million. But you're right, the pushback is going to be great. 1,800 cities, including Washington, are planning no king protests, voicing anger against Trump's actions. Here's the president on that.
What do they call it? No kings?
No kings.
I don't feel like a king. I have to go through hell to get stuff approved. No, we're not a king. We're not a king at all.
You know, in the president's continuing feud with California's governor, he signed a resolution to block new sales of gas-powered cars in California, ending California's electric vehicle mandate and emission standards. Sandy?
Okay, Joy, thanks. We want to show our viewers what some are calling a shocking scene in California today, where high-ranking Senator Alex Padilla was detained after interrupting a press conference held by Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem.
Guys, ready? And bell. Sir, hands up. I'm Senator Alex Padilla. I have questions for the Secretary.
Now, Padilla, a Democrat and a leading voice in the Senate on immigration, was shoved out of the room, forced to the ground, and handcuffed by security. Noem was in Los Angeles to address the protests around Donald Trump's immigration policies and ICE operations in the region. Okay, so now protests are anticipated in Calgary starting Sunday as world leaders, including Donald Trump, arrive in Alberta for the 2-day G7 summit in Kananaskis, hosted by Prime Minister Mark Carney. Now, you can be sure there'll be a significant security presence in several Alberta cities. CTV's Kathy Lee is in Calgary and can fill us in on preparations underway for the talks, which officially begin on Monday. Kathy.
Sandy, the security for the G7 summit is massive. Thousands of police officers, RCMP, military personnel, and other security agencies are spread across Calgary, Kananaskis, and Banff. In the city, military aircraft are already at the Calgary International Airport. This video was shot by an aviation enthusiast who says it was a rare experience to see the Ospreys and Blackhawks. The Calgary Airport Authority says as the days inch closer to G7, people can expect to see more military aircraft and an increase in police presence at the airport. Travelers should not be impacted, but there will be some disruptions on the roads.
It will be short-lived. But as we're moving head to state around and as the aircraft come in and around the airport, there may be some interruption to the flow of traffic. And we're working with Calgary Police to make sure that's as smooth as possible.
Calgary Police say since last month, motorcades have been planning and practicing the routes through the city to prepare for when some of the most powerful leaders of the world arrive. Officers here and from Winnipeg, Edmonton, Vancouver, and the Tsuut'ina Nation will be assisting RCMP.
We need to be prepared to deal with any of the calls for service related to G7 demonstrations, increased traffic volume, things along those lines.
A G7 protest is planned for Sunday in Calgary. Police say there are several designated protest areas in the city and in Banff. They are optimistic that the demonstrations will be peaceful. Sandy.
CTV's Kathy Lee. Well, a major blow against organized crime, according to police, with the arrest of the alleged head of the Montreal Mafia.
Everybody is being arrested. They not on drug trafficking. They're being arrested on murders. They're not going to be charged for 2 years in prison. They're being charged for 25 years in prison. So that's the impact.
Leonardo Rizzuto, the 56-year-old son of the late reputed mob boss Vito Rizzuto, was among 11 people arrested. The suspects are alleged to be members of the Italian Mafia, Hells Angels, and local street gangs. They're all accused of having links to murders between 2011 and 2021. Police say the operation, named Project Alliance, was 3 years in the making. Well, it's almost a wrap for the Crown at the London, Ontario trial of 5 former World Junior hockey players. The defense is done. The men have been accused of sexual assault. All have entered not guilty pleas. CTV's Heather Wright now on today's submissions and what happens next. Heather.
Sandy, today the Crown told the judge that the complainant initially tried to resist on that night nearly 7 years ago, but eventually gave in due to fear.
The Crown says EM was in over her head. Naked in a hotel room with a bunch of hockey players, the complainant in this case initially tried to resist in passive ways, according to the Crown, like refusing to get on the ground because it was dirty. But when a player put a sheet down, EM then went along with what she thinks was expected. Some people will fight or resist, some people will flee, some people will appease. These are normal and predictable responses. Crown Attorney Megan Cunningham is trying to counter the narrative put forward by the defense that EM was a willing and active participant in the sexual activity that took place nearly 7 years ago, and that she changed her story over the years to avoid embarrassment for her actions and to bolster her civil case against Hockey Canada. In their closing submissions, the defense accused EM of being difficult and having an agenda in her testimony, something the Crown pushed back on today. If EM had any agenda while testifying, it was to ensure she was not misunderstood. Megan Cunningham went further, saying the way the defense has characterized the complainant is a key reason why many alleged victims don't come forward. If she's too emotional, she's combative. If she's not emotional enough, she's rehearsed. If she uses the same language over and over, it's contrived. If she uses different language, she's inconsistent. The Crown also accused the players of cooking up the story that it was the complainant asking for sex, not them. Cunningham points to testimony from players Boris Kachuk and Trevor Radish, who both said the complainant was in bed when they arrived to the room and didn't offer or ask for sexual activity. Neither Kachuk nor Radish face any charges.
There has been a lot of back and forth today, the judge interjecting and pushing back on some of the submissions made by the Crown. Those closing submissions will continue tomorrow. Sandy.
All right, Heather Wright in London. Coming up, weathering the wildfire season.
Everybody feels the loss.
The growing scale of devastation and risk in the West. It looks like this wildfire season is tracking to be one of the worst in Canadian history, particularly in the West. So it comes as no surprise to those living through it. Now, fire officials are keeping tabs on a wildfire near Squamish, BC, and an adjacent provincial park. CTV's BC Bureau Chief Andrew Johnson on this and why next month's outlook is particularly concerning. Andrew.
Sandy, we could be in for a repeat of 2023, the worst fire season in Canadian history. That's based on what's happened so far, primarily in Saskatchewan and Manitoba, and what may be still to come, particularly here in BC. The new outlook comes on the day Alice Lake Provincial Park near Squamish between Vancouver and Whistler is being evacuated because of a human-caused fire. People in 200 homes are on evacuation alert. It's been a long couple of days for them. Across the country, wildfires have already torched 35,000 square kilometers in 2025. It's very early for that much destruction. Take a look at this chart from federal officials. The area burned to date this year is the second most ever, tracking closely to 2 years ago.
My heart is with the communities, families and individuals affected by these wildfires, and please know that Canadians across the country are standing with you. I know you're scared. Our government will continue to do everything that we can to help.
And here's what's ahead. Fire severity across Western Canada into July is expected to be above average. The highest danger of all heading into the peak summer months is in southern British Columbia, a very fire-prone area that has been left largely untouched while the prairies burned. Sandy.
Andrew, thanks for this. Now, thousands, of course, have been displaced by the wildfires from BC through to Ontario. But now there's some good news for those forced to leave La Ronge, Saskatchewan. They're going home. CTV's Alison Bamford picks up that file. Hi, Alison. How's it going so far?
Sandy, there's mixed emotions in town for sure. People obviously overjoyed and relieved to be returning home. But for those who lost everything, like these homes just north of the town, it's a tough reality. Fires leveled several houses and cabins in neighboring communities. Within La Ronge, 2 businesses went up in flames, the Rona store and Robertson Trading, a former fur trading post that also held decades worth of Indigenous artwork.
I'm still in the process of processing, if that makes sense. I drive by here every day. I find it hard to believe. Still, I find it hard to believe.
Around 7,000 people in the tri-community area of La Ronge, Air Ronge and Lac La Ronge Indian Band started heading home this morning after being displaced for more than a week. Maggie Roberts didn't know her house and truck would still be here after learning how close the flames were.
So we heard there's a fire here, so we don't know. But we're good friends with a doctor that lives up the hill, so he was taking care of the place.
Even those coming back to their homes still standing, it won't be a complete return to normal. Aerial supports are still flying overhead, and there are hot spots still being put out nearby. Sandy?
CTV's Alison Bamford. And we've created an interactive tracker to show you where wildfires are burning across the country and where smoke is affecting air quality. You can find that by heading to ctvnews.ca. And CTV National News. We'll be right back. It probably comes as no surprise to many that Canadians are being forced to wait longer to receive critical surgeries, even longer than before COVID-19 hit. Procedures like cancer surgeries, hip and knee replacements, and removal of cataracts have not kept up with the demands of an aging and growing population. Also, the average wait time for an MRI was 15 days longer last year than it was before the pandemic. Well, 2 Toronto concerts are drawing more interest than usual. American rapper Kendrick Lamar is set to perform in the city in his first visit to the hometown of nemesis Drake.
He'll do the diss tracks 100%, but I don't expect anything too crazy from tonight.
The 2 men have been engaged in a high-profile feud over songs that are insulting to the other. Drake fans are expected to collect outside the stadium and blast his music. And a statue of Sir John A. Macdonald is back out in the open at Queen's Park, the home of Ontario's provincial legislature, after 5 years in a box.
He's a controversial figure, and he is also, the issue surrounding residential schools is still very raw for many people.
The monument was removed in 2020 after being defaced during a summer of discontent over Canada's residential schools legacy. The country's first prime minister was a key architect of that system. The statue will be monitored by security around the clock. After the break, illuminating an historic milestone. The family legacy lighting the past and present at an iconic site. Canada's most easterly point, Cape Spear, Newfoundland, is celebrating a milestone, 50 years since it came under the control of Parks Canada. But the history of that rugged terrain is much older, as is the story of the lighthouses and the family who manages them. CTV's Garrett Barry takes us on a journey through time, thanks to some interesting locals. Garrett.
Sandy, the story of Cape Spear is also very much the story of the Cantwell family. For almost 150 years, this family manned the lighthouses here at this historic site.
This is our second home, this house was. As a matter of fact, we're sitting in a bedroom right now.
Jerry Cantwell is the last in a line of 8 Cantwell men to have lived and toiled here at Cape Spear.
Just doing what I was doing anyway, with my father and for my father and things of that nature. Things never changed for me.
A family dynasty keeping this old lighthouse and its newer replacement until automation made those jobs obsolete in 1997.
You can't stand in the way of electronics. You can't stay in the way of advancement, you know? It's just one of those things that comes with time.
This family legacy is about to get new recognition in a series of installations featuring the Cantwell family in their own words, to be placed around Cape Spear.
One of them is actually audio posts. So someone will be able to be on site and turn a crank and hear the voice of a Cantwell sibling telling their story.
The actual change is an amazing thing. Because you're so used to doing something for 50 years and then all of a sudden you're doing nothing.
All those memories in those interviews, they should be open to the public to hear before the end of the summer. Sandy.
Okay, thanks for this, Garrett. And thank you for sharing your time with us. I'm Sandy Ronaldo. Your local CTV News is coming up. Be well.